4th or 7th. I don't even know where I'm from. No, there is no appropriation. I kind of scratched my head when the chairman of the committee got up and said there was appropriation and asked for referral, and I think he just confused it with there is a cost to the department. Basically, a fiscal impact of most of it non-administrative. But yes, there is a minimal impact. However, when you look at the fiscal note, I did get some additional information from the Board of Medicine, from the and there is also some additional costs that's not in your fiscal impact, and I need to make sure you understand that it's there in all fairness, and that is they're going to have to revise their computer database to be able to license these folks, and they show a cost of $36,853 to do that. So and they'll be charging some license fees. They don't. I think the revenues are the first year. They're estimating $3,900 and then like $2,700. And if
it seems to me when we do the practice act, and this is a brand new practice act, right?
Correct.
And so in the past, it seems to me, and maybe that's why the referral is that in the past we used to, thank you. I forgot to turn it on. Thank you. In the past, oftentimes there's been a fairly nominal appropriation of maybe $10,000 to $20,000 that's kind of seed money to get this done, because you've got to get this board up and going. They got to set their regs, they got to get their fees, and then they sometimes that money's paid back, sometimes it's not paid back. So I mean, at the end, how do you intend to have the initial money to start and to do the work that it takes on this board? Is that why this is here? Does it need an appropriation?
I mean, it'd be great to have an appropriation, but in these difficult times, it's tough to seek one. As a past board member on a particular board in my profession, normally any changes that we made were eventually paid by recouping it through fees over time. And I would imagine the administrative cost to fix the computer system would eventually be paid, but not. But it will be a while, because we're not talking about a lot of licensees in this particular profession.
How many folks do you? What's the available population to belong to this association?
Well, there are none right now in Wyoming, because it's not. We had testimony from a practitioner who was from, I believe it was from the Evanston area, and she's practicing now in Atlanta because she can't come home. There's no ability for her to practice here, but she would like to come home someday to Wyoming, but without a practice act to allow her to do her profession in the state, we can't do that.
Right.
The estimates are that there will be probably a dozen practitioners initially seeking licensure, so there's not a lot.
Maybe we join them with the midwives, and they have the midwives. So if you get enough licensees, you could actually have some. That's a bad joke, but anyway, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice
So
Chairman.
just I should know this. I've been on appropriations long enough, because you said there's no appropriation in here. If this bill just creates a fee, collects a fee, puts it into this board's budget, it's nothing that requires an appropriation in the bill, and we're not involved in appropriating and reappropriating.
Technically you are, but I think that's in the bill. The bill, I would assume it's like every other practice act. There's language in there that allows just automatically creates an auto appropriation of their fees for their expenses.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Vice President?
I would move the bill.
You want to move the bill, or just want to move to refer it back to committee of the whole?
Either one.
Mr. Chairman.
We end up in the same place, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, before we do any motions, let's take a roll call so that we know we have a quorum to make a motion.
Oh, thank you. Have you frantically been trying to?
Thank you,
I thought
Senator
you were,
Kinski.
I thought you were maybe giving me the bird. I didn't know you were trying to give me a call roll.
She was swatting the fly.
Yeah, anyway, why don't you go ahead and call the roll, Karen? Thank you. Thank you,
Absolutely,
Mr.
sir.
Vice Chair.
Senator Guru,
Here.
Senator Hicks,
I think I'm here.
Senator Kinski,
Here.
Senator Steinmetz, Chairman Perkins,
Here.
you have a quorum.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Vice President.
I move that we re-referred this bill back to the committee of the whole.
Question?
We don't need to we don't need a roll call on that one, do we? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries or we refer it back to committee of the whole.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee, and thank you for putting me at the head of the list. I appreciate it. I got to get down to revenue.
Go get him, Senator Pappas. All right, so the next bill for our consideration is we're back on Senate File 136, Required Public Service Commission considerations. We had closed public comment and we were going to begin to work the bill. I understand that there's some people that have additional comments they'd like to make. I'm absent being overruled by the committee. I'm not going to reopen public comment. If we're happy to take your public comments if you want to submit them in writing or send emails to us or other people on the floor, but we've got a lot going on this week and we need to keep moving. So with that, we're on Senate File 136. Members, what's your pleasure? Bill's been moved by Senator Kinski, seconded by Senator Guru. Mr. Vice Chair.
I would defer to your judgment on this. I am a little bit concerned, and maybe it's ill-founded, that when we talk about determining reliability in and outside the state, that might be taken that we're just poking our nose into other states' business, when really our concern about reliability outside of the state is because we belong to these multi-state power grids. And if one state is not reliable, it can impact the reliability within our own state. And I wonder if language to clarify that is in order, or if as I defer to your legal expertise. If you don't think we really need to do that, I'll just leave it alone, because I think fewer words is always better.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have anything else on this bill? Do you remember the language that was sent in by, you've got that? I mean, I look at that and I think that's a really good amendment. And Senator Guru?
Mr. Chairman, if it's appropriate, I'd like to move the amendment from that was provided to us. Let's see, it doesn't have a date on it. It doesn't have a page number, but.
Right.
Proposed amendment from the PSC to Senate File 136.
Right, and what that amendment does is it strikes the new language on page 2, lines 12 through 17. Actually, just it removes all of that, and then what it does is on page 3 it restores the language on line 3 of reliability. Inserts the word "and." On line 3, it restores the existing language and reinserts liability. On line 7 through 9, after consideration, it deletes the new language. And on line 14, it creates a new subsection D, which reads, "The commission may, in all matters pertaining to plans, proposals, or applications, or authority to construct or retire major facilities, have any immediate impact or potential effects on rates charged to customers, or to recover through rates any cost thereof, consider reliability and cost externalities incurred by the state of Wyoming, including economic, employment, and viewshed impacts." So that's what the amendment does. So is that your motion?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second? Second. Discussion on the motion? A quick question for you. I mean, we heard some testimony about viewshed impacts. Is the tendency to leave viewshed impacts in the amended language or to take it out? I would note that when you talk about consider reliability and cost externalities incurred by the state of Wyoming, and then you have the words including economic, employment, and viewshed impacts, it's not limited to those three items. Those are just examples of the types of cost externalities and reliability issues that they look at. So when you have, generally when you have including, those are examples of, and so anything that's similar to those types of things, they can also look at. So whether, but obviously viewshed impacts, you know, is expands that list certainly beyond the what our other two are, economic and employment, or have obviously a tighter relationship with respect to the fact they both affect economics. Viewshed impacts could affect economics, but it also affects other things. So, Mr. Vice President.
Friendly amendment to the amendment.
Okay.
At least I think it's friendly. So when you go down to the last line where it says, get to the very issue you talked about, where it says incurred by the state of Wyoming, including, I would just add including but not limited to.
And you can put that in, I think, and we'll leave that to the Legals LSO, but I don't know that it makes any difference. I think ultimately they mean the same thing, but we can put that in and we'll let LSO use
That's
whatever
fine.
conforming language, including but not limited to.
And Mr. Chairman, do you read this where it just talks about reliability to include reliability as it may impact us on the multi-state grid?
I think that is, we also have to, if you go back on page 3, we've also reinserted reliability on line 3. So we're talking about reliability of engineering water just and reasonable rates. Commission may take into consideration availability or reliability availability and reliability of service, depreciation of plant, technological obsolescence of equipment, expense of operation, physical or other values of plant system, blah, blah, blah. So we now have reliability in 2 places. So we could put it more if you want.
No, I'm just wondering whether it's implicit in there that they'll be looking not just at the reliability within the borders of the state, but also reliability on the grid.
I think they have to, but they just, again, you have to be very, very careful about what you do in and outside the state. So, yeah,
Fine.
okay.
Question.
So we have, well, we need this. We have the amendment to the amendment, which is to add the words after including but not limited to. Was there a second on your, seconded by Senator Steinmetz? Is there further discussion on the amendment to the amendment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The motion carries. We're back on the original amendment, the original question. Further discussion on the original question of the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. We're back on the bill. Are there any further amendments to the bill? Let me just check with Karen. Karen, do you have what we've done with our sausage today? Okay. Thank you. Let's do, we'll go ahead and let's call a roll on the bill.
On Senate File 136 as amended, Senator Guru.
Aye.
Senator Hicks.
Aye.
Senator Kinski. Senator Steinmetz. Chairman Perkins.
Aye.
5 ayes.
Okay, we'll go. I guess since I'm on this, since I'm the sponsor, I'll carry it. Okay. Next bill for our consideration today will be, I think it's federal emergency COVID-19 relief funding. So it's corrected copy of, and so as we look at this bill, we've got Senate File 118, we've got a corrected copy. Also in our packet, there's, I think, an updated fiscal note. Maybe it's updated. It should be in a green sheet right in your list over here. And then, so in your, if you're looking through your green pages on the right side of your.
That'd be left. Or
on your left, yeah.
both. Federal, okay, there it is, behind
There
the
it is.
Steinmetz amendment.
And then you should also have, the governor's office sent over a sheet that looks like this. Okay, so I think we've been, and so this includes, the corrected copy includes the Steinmetz amendment that was adopted by the committee. We heard this, no? Mine
Mr. Chairman,
says,
the corrected copy, for whatever reason, I don't know why it was corrected. I compared it against the original, could not find any changes.
mine,
Senator Steinmetz asked me to prepare that amendment so that you would all have it, so that you could look at it and wouldn't have to rely on your notes, because you did accept that amendment at your last meeting before you laid back the
Okay.
bill.
all right, that's right. This is continued, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
All right, and so we've got, we'll get to that. I think we've got that sheet, and so let's go ahead, unless any members, anything you want to visit about before we open this up for public comment?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Vice Chair.
So Senate File 118, I have corrected copy. Does corrected mean it has the Steinmetz amendment incorporated into it? Okay, what was corrected from the version of 118 we had earlier?
Senator Kinski, I'm not aware of what that change is. I've read both the corrected and the original line for line, and I can't find the change. I'm sure legal does have something, but I believe it's probably a punctuation or something like that. I've not been able to determine what it is. However, the corrected amendment that you have from Senator Steinmetz I did update it so that it matches line for line against the corrected copy as opposed to the original one that you worked from last week.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, to refresh my recollection, pursuant to our prior discussion and Senator Steinmetz's amendment, the purpose was to make clear that this money is going to projects that need to be finished, correct?
Right.
Because it was not clear
I think
earlier.
there's some more work to do on that, and I think Randy's going to talk about this here in a second too. So if you
Okay.
remember, we've got that, this is the two bills within one bill deal, all deals with code relief. We're bouncing back and forth between the continuing resolution money and then also some remaining COVID money. So we bounce out, we kind of set that parallel up where we're going, A, we'll refer to I think the continuing resolution money, and then B, refer to the leftover COVID money as we go through the bill, so are ready. Any other comments that we want to, or clarifications, and get our minds around this before?
And by
we open this up?
continuing resolution, you mean the new funds, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, the new funds in January where they passed it as part of continuing resolution
January of 2021.
2021, yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And yeah, all right, and that set up the rent assistance and utility assistance program that comes through, and basically it's pretty much, you just got to do how they've got it set up. And then the other part was dealing with leftover money from the CARES Act from last year, the 20 million that's in that one column. Okay? Anything else?
No, I have nothing.
All right, so I think we've got Rennie on the line, don't we, Karen?
We have Erica Legursky from the governor's
Oh,
office.
and Erica. We have Erica and no Rennie today?
No Rennie today. I'm solo today, so my apologies. You just get me.
Oh, no. Oh, no. If anybody should apologize, it should be Rennie. So go ahead, Erica.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Erica Legursky, and I'm a senior policy advisor for Governor Gordon. I'm here today to do some follow-up on the last time that we met regarding our presentation. I've got some good news today, I hope, and I'm happy to present that with the hard work of the state agencies and what the committee has done to shed some light on these programs, that the agencies have been able to get out a significant amount of money since the end of February, roughly around 41.7 million. Mr. Chairman, you've asked a couple of different times about the 98 million that has been encumbered and what that is made up of. The spreadsheet that you referred to earlier that our office had sent to you, I can go through that and I'll try and share that on my screen and I can pull that up for you.
If you would, because I'm having trouble figuring out what this chart is telling me.
Yep, nope, I sure will do that, Mr. Chairman. Let me pull that up and then I can. Can you guys see that on there now?
Yes, not
Okay.
very well. You might go into, you don't have a full screen mode, do you, on that? But
I don't, but I can try and make it a little bit bigger and then maybe,
Aaron, I think that's helpful. You have to move your cursor around a little bit, but I think I'm getting it now.
okay,
Go ahead and take us through a couple of them and then we'll
okay.
probably-
So, Mr. Chairman, just to kind of give you a little bit of a recap. So when we had that 98 million that we were referring to, that was from February 25th when we were looking at those reports. So we had 98 million encumbered and then about 20 million that was unobligated. That was in looking at Wolves. In looking at Wolves yesterday, that encumbered amount has been reduced to 56 million, and there's still the 20 million that's unobligated. So what that means is that's where that 41.7 million was that the agencies were able to get out. 29.3 million of that went out to locals. 5.3 million of that went out to hospitals. And then we had about 5.8 that went out in the energy rebound program. So that's a little bit better than what we had last time we were talking to you. And Mr. Chairman, just to keep in mind, I know that we've talked a couple of different times, but those figures change every day as those agencies are doing work in there. So the spreadsheet that I shared with you, and that's on the screen, which will hopefully be useful for you going forward, it has the categories on here. The categories, if you'll recall, are the categories that we had on our WebSense. So we have economic, business, education, broadband, testing, contact tracing. So you'll see those buckets in here. There's a local government bucket, and you'll see that we've actually split out tourism and tribal relations once we get to there. But those are just the categories that are on that side. We tried to really look at programs and roll up any of those things that were not programs. So that's in the second column. The third column is what the governor's office had given to the agencies. So within the whole 1.25 billion, we have what the agencies received is in your next column. The fourth column over is what the expenditures are that are in Wolves. And so as of the time that we pulled that report yesterday, we had 1,114 million that was actually given out as expenditures. And so that's where we had that large increase from what went out from the end of February until now.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the last four columns, what I tried to do was incorporate Senator Kinski's questions that we had, and then kind of the way that we were thinking of it in the office. So the first question that I had gotten from Senator Kinski last week was, what projects were finished by December 30th but not paid in full? The way that we think of that on our side is what can be expended without this legislation. The next column is what projects were not finished by the deadline and that need to be extended or paid. That is where the Senate File 118 will come in. And then we had what projects were approved but did not get off the ground. That's where we were thinking of is what items cannot be paid unless a program is renewed or a new program is set up. And then we have our final column is agencies have either identified to us that they are going to return funds to us because they can't expend those, or those funds had already been returned to us. So those are the four, kind of the four columns to look at. I'll take you through, for example, you guys can see the economic business relief. It's kind of the fourth column, the second gray bar down. It says economic business relief, the endurance fund. There is 85.5 million that we had allocated to the agency for that program. As of now, Business Council has been able to get out 82.8 million in that account is what they have as their expenditures. And they have indicated to us that there's about 2.8 million of funds that are left and that are going to be returned to us.
And that's a perfect example of one of the things that I'm struggling to understand. Why is that 2.785 million being returned? It's not under the expend without legislation. So it's just, is it, I'm just wondering, is it not being returned because there simply wasn't applications? Every application that was made and accepted and qualified was paid and there's no more applications? Or is it because December 30 of 2020 came? So why is there 2.785 million left in that line?
Mr. Chairman, the explanation that we got on that one was that the unobligated funds that they had of the 2.7 were returned, and it's in that account. I don't know if they had given some funds out that weren't accepted in that fund, but we do know that within that fund, to get all of the funds out and to get all of the requests out, they would need an additional 133 million. So the endurance program had 133 million in approved funds that were applied for, but they were not able to get those out due to the lack of funding and that we had given that program. So for that 2.7, it could be that those funds were either given to somebody and they didn't accept those funds, or there have been audits that have been going on within the business council programs. And this could also be funds that have been returned as a result of those audits.
But anyway, all right, we got that. Senator Guru, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do recall, I think that 2.785 was audit money returned from the programs above, the relief mitigate, or mostly from the mitigation and relief programs. At least I think that's what it was. My question, Erica, or Ms. Legursky, I'm sorry. You say 85 million on the endurance fund, 82 spent. Did you say 130 was the original request? Because I know there's a gap. I'm just trying to figure.
Mr. Chairman. Senator Groove, for that, what my understanding from that is we had only given 85.5 million to the business council that they could use for that endurance program. My understanding is that they had 133 million in excess of applications that were turned in that they could not approve due to lack of funding.
So there were 215, $220 million of applications. That's what you're telling us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I would be very curious if you might, I'd be very curious to know about the audit results on that and what in the audit triggered that and why that came back. I'd just be very interested to know about that. I think that's really important. I'm delighted to hear that. Yeah, I think you never know. You always have to be a little bit wary of auditors, but is there a way that you could get any of that information, about, at least just a couple of, and if it's more than one, just a couple of examples of what the audit findings were and why that money was paid back?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have that readily available, but I can get together with business council and see if they can give me some high level information on those audits.
Is it the Department of Audit that did those?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that they hired a third party firm to do those audits.
And so is it the Department of Audit that hired the third party, or was it the business council? Who hired the auditor?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that the business council hired the third party auditor.
The business council. Okay, thank you. All right, keep going.
So Mr. Chairman, within those buckets that you'll see, and I'll just kind of scroll down here to the bottom. If you look on Wolf's, because I know that you guys are getting reports from Wolf's, you'll see that the agency has received around 1.2 billion is what we've allocated to them thus far. The 1,114 million is what we now need expenditures. And then you can see that of the 4 buckets, that equates to roughly around 77 million. And so if you look in the Wolf system, or if you get Wolf's reports, it will have that broken down between expended and unobligated. And so what we did is the encumbered amount was 56.7 million. And then the unencumbered amount or unobligated amount in Wolf's is about 20 million. I tried to break it out a little bit here to where you could see, we believe that there's about 57 million that can continue to be spent without this legislation. And then the remainder of that, about 15 million, would be in the next 2 buckets with Senate File 118 needed to continue these programs. And then 10 million would be for the items cannot be paid unless the program is renewed. So we tried to break it into those buckets. We do feel that this bill would be a good kind of belt and suspenders approach to allow these programs to continue to go forward. The ones that are in the 5.7 million, you've got mental health, Department of Family Service, and then the OSLI programs that could benefit from Senate File 118. And then there are several programs that could potentially need new buckets where we would believe that some new legislation would need to be drafted so that we could initiate some new programs.
Okay. And so, Erica, just so I understand, on some of these, you have money that's unexpended and returned, but we don't need new legislation to do that. You just, I think the preference of I would take it from the governor's office that if it's in that far right column, the governor's office would just as soon have those returned, and so they can be rededicated or reapplied either in this bill or other legislation that might come through the legislature and get to the governor's desk.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. So I think that with those funds that have either been returned or potentially going to be returned, that we could potentially use those within the Senate File 118 bucket, or we would need some new legislation for that.
Okay, and so as we go through some of these, if there, I don't know, I don't think there's going to be any wholesale disagreements. I think that there's multiple claims on this COVID money that's whether it's 20 million or 23 million or 19 million or 30 million. I think there's going to be plenty of people that want a shot at that. This bill, along with other bills, would cover that. But if there's specific programs that the legislature might like to see continued, and we've talked about a couple of those, we might have a little bit for, and I don't like to say, I don't think it's a wholesale, but I think there's probably 2 or 3 in here that we might have a little bit of a difference of opinion with the governor's office on whether or not those programs ought to be reauthorized. We'll keep the communications open, and we'll just visit with you all about that. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, that sounds good. And then one last thing, Mr. Chairman, and then I'll be done with my presentation unless you have any more questions. I highlighted on here the healthcare fortification for hospitals. It's on the second page if you're looking at the hard copy. If you're looking at an electronic version, it's on line 15. I don't know if my lines came up on there, but you'll see in the column that says for the Senate File 118, there's the 600,000. That's the 600,000, and then there's a note over there also that talks about the Johnson County Healthcare Center. And that's just something that you guys have talked about and brought up a couple different times. So I put that in that bucket for the Senate File 118 would be needed. The OSLI currently does not have that 600,000 to pay for that. So if that were something that we come to the agreement that Johnson County did need that funding, we would have to give OSLI the 600,000 for them to be able to pay for that. And to your point, Mr. Chairman, that could come out of some of those return funds that were not allocated to a specific program.
So as I look at our columns as we go over the amount, we have the 55 million and change that was allocated. We have the 48 that's in the Wolf's actual expenditures. We've got 6.8 million that can't be expended without legislation. But all the governor's office is asking in 118 is that for $600,000 to finish that one project, I think, if I remember right. Am I tracking that right?
Mr. Chairman, I thought in 118 that you were going to give an appropriation of roughly around.
Did you understand what she said? Your mic isn't picking you up really well.
Oh, my apologies, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I was thinking that in that appropriation for Senate File 118, that it was roughly around 20 million that you guys had in there as far as for items that were needing the 118 legislation that could be potentially moved around.
I get that. No, I was just specifically speaking, I was just trying to understand the hospital line. Okay. So if you go to the middle of page 2, we've got the hospital line. You've got the $55 million that was allocated. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
We got the 49 million, excuse me, the 55 million that was allocated, the 48 million that has been expended under the Wolf system. You then have 6.8 million that can't be expended under the column that can't be expended without legislation.
No, it can be expended.
Oh, it can be expended without legislation, but you need 118. Thank you for that. You need 118 for that. You need 118 would cover the $600,000 grant that was authorized, but we've ran out of time or whatever that was. I'm reading. Is that how I'm reading that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
All right.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Erica, on the column that says what projects were finished by December 30, but not fully paid yet, can be expended without legislation. Is that something that, what does that mean? They're just, the invoices are being processed, but they haven't hit Wolf's yet?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kinsky, yes, that's correct.
Okay. And you know, I didn't have a chance to speak in any great detail with the Johnson County Health Care Center. What happened on this last 600,000? Do you know?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding from the Office of State Lands on this one is that those items that they are asking to be reimbursed for actually happened between December 15th and December 30th. And my understanding, the way that the rules were written, is that they were only paying for expenditures through December 15th. So that was where that discrepancy was between that 600,000 is my understanding.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Go ahead.
The actual statutory deadline is December 30. There's nothing in statute about December 15 to December 30. Just haven't changed the rule. What I had understood is get those invoices in by December 15th. There is a danger we may not get it all processed on time. I didn't understand that the deadline was moved ahead by 15 days from the 30th to the 15th.
Mr. Chairman, I think that you're correct on there. The legislation did say the end of December, and then the chapter rules said December 13th, December 15th. So I think that maybe is just a distinguishing thing that we'll just have to decide how we want to handle that instance.
Can she get closer to her mic?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I don't know why it's not picking me up. Mr. Chairman, I think that you're right, where there is a difference in the dates on those two between the rules and the legislation.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I don't believe the rules actually said you couldn't get paid unless it was in by the 15th. I don't think the rules created a new deadline, but if they did, why do we need to pass a bill? Just have them change the rules. Isn't that the sensible thing, Erica?
Mr. Chairman, we can definitely look at that.
And that may be the case. And that may be the case for that, but I don't think it's the case for all of the money.
Correct. No, I get it.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Well, I guess I'd ask then, Mr. Chairman, is there anybody else that's caught in this limbo of they didn't get it in by the 15th, but they got the work done by the 30th, other than Johnson County Health Care Center?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kinsky, not that I'm aware of, but we can ask that question.
Okay, they're just lucky in Buffalo.
Yeah, lucky like it's your turn for the IRS audit, so. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll take, thank you for this information. I think that's helpful to us. And we'll take a look at that and we'll keep visiting about this. And I think it'll be pretty late in March by the time we figure out where all this 20-odd million, 23 million's going. So, okay, anything else for us, Erica?
No, Mr. Chairman, just if you have any other questions, please reach out and I'll see if I can, and I'll get these other questions answered about who else was caught in that time frame and then the audit findings.
All right, thank you. Members, any other questions for Erica Legursky before we let her go? Thank you, Erica, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. And I'm a little fuzzy about where we left off when we did this bill. Were we still talking about it? We just held it back because we were waiting for that information. Have we taken public comment? Where did we leave off on this?
Chairman Perkins, you had taken public comment on it. You had actually moved the bill and we're already working the bill.
Okay, we were working the
When you
bill.
laid it back.
Then we had this information we wanted and we laid it back because we also ran out of time. Okay. Thank you for that. So with that, we're back on the bill. So Senator Steinmetz, you have us the amendment to the corrected copy. Do you want to take us, you're going to move that amendment or what do you want to do? What's your pleasure?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We actually adopted the amendment.
But then it got changed. So we're just working the amendment. So
Wait a
help me
minute.
understand, when the amendment we came back, so on the amendment, when we take this, when we go through, we had this in, if we go to page 3, line 16. So we're in the CARES Act money, we've got this. And so I was thinking that your amendment was attempting to extend the deadlines on existing programs. And so that we didn't necessarily have a hard stop under the old act of December 31. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The direction of this amendment was to allow entities that had been approved for funding to receive the funding without it being reapproved by the administering agency.
Okay. And so, I think this is the problem we have to reconcile. I like the amendment. You and I have talked about this many times. I think the problem we have to reconcile is what this section 2 and where that amendment's going. I think what it does though is it pulls it in and it makes it out of that $20 million that is unobligated and unexpended. And so in some respects, I think some of the money that you were targeting wasn't necessarily unobligated and unexpended. It was obligated but unexpended and looked like it would not be able to be expended. And I think that's the thing we've got to reconcile with your amendment to make it work.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree.
And so I think what we probably need to do is we probably need to go to section 2, and in section 2, we probably need, and maybe we need a section 3 and then renumber so that we just come back and we've got a separate section that deals with this subset of grants and programs that are not unobligated, unexpended, but were obligated but unexpended. Yeah, I think so. Anyway, I'm getting looks from the vice president and the vice chair like I've been having too much fun.
No, I just think we can do all kinds of great work, but if they pass regulations that run counter to what we've got in legislation, there's only so much you can do. I'm still fretting over that a little bit, but I think I'm ready to move forward with however you think we should best get this thing
So
crafted.
I tell you, where I am at is I think you move this bill forward and I think we just maybe, I think I'd like to we just work on an amendment and bring it to committee of the whole. I don't think I don't know how to fix this right now. And so I don't know that I can make an amendment right now, but I agree. And I think we can look at this and this will help us narrow down what we need to look at.
So, Mr. Chairman, do we want the Steinmetz amendment to come out as a standing committee amendment? And then if you decide that we just want to pull it, we'd run your committee of the
We
whole
can do
amendment
that.
instead?
We can do that. I think we can do that. And I think if also we run the amendment and it really doesn't work, we're going to hear.
Well, Mr.
If we screw
Chairman,
this
we
bill
could-
up, we'll hear about it.
We could pull the amendment off too. I'm not married to the amendment. We want to get it right, not.
I don't have anything to offer in exchange. I understand what you're trying to do. And maybe this will do it. Maybe just expand this so it works for both.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Just leave it? Okay. So
What was that? Leave one
just pass it out the way that it is for right now
with the amendment?
Yes.
with the amendment?
with the amendment.
When you say leave it, are we leaving the bill or are we leaving the amendment?
We leave the amendment.
Leaving the
And,
amendment, all right. We've already adopted the amendment, but now it's just corrected. It's the corrected amendment to the corrected copy of the bill that we couldn't figure out why it was corrected in the first place.
So
Okay, we're all on the same page.
yeah, the fun part about this will be explaining on the floor when the bill starts out with jumping back and forth from relief, extension, and the amendments, but
Well, that's why it's your bill.
is my name corrected? Oh, that's right. I stand corrected. I've said that before,
Yeah. No, we might give, we'll probably give you a break. You've been carrying
I'm
us
good.
on this.
Move the
budget.
bill.
Bill's been moved and seconded. I think we're just ready to call the roll on the bill.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Karen just wants a roll call. So I'm going to clarify with you. We are voting on Senate File 118 as amended when it was laid back.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The
Yeah,
corrected
but now
copy
it's
with the
the
corrected amendment of the
corrected,
corrected.
corrected copy of Senate File 118. Yep,
All right.
as amended.
Karen
Yes.
goes home at night to say, how was work? She just goes,
Senators. I hate them.
All right. Senator Guru. Senator Hicks. Senator Kinsky.
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz. Chairman Perkins.
Aye.
5 ayes. Mr. Chairman.
So the companion is HB 263? And that would be for healthcare facilities for new continuing resolution monies.
Yeah. Okay.
Chairman Perkins,
Yes.
I'm getting a little bit of feedback between your microphone and Senator Kinsky's microphone. I would ask either of you to move your microphones a little bit further apart or more conscientiously turn yours on or off so they don't pick up each other.
It's my bad.
I'm sorry, I'm not very conscientious, so thank you for that reminder. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to lay back 121, and then we're going to go to fraud, waste. What time we got? Go to fraud, waste, and abuse. 115. Senator James. So go ahead and call Senator James.
He's right over there. Senator.
Oh, there he
James.
is. Okay, come on up, Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. So bringing back an old friend from last year. It's a good bill, cute little bill. So I hope we can get it out this time, get it all passed and everything. So reason for this bill is we've had a lot of issues and a lot of examples of waste, fraud, and abuse throughout our system and throughout Wyoming. Couple examples is the Medicaid issue that we had a few years ago regarding our investigator that we had and the Attorney General and that they were doing with the foster home care and reimbursements. Another one we had in my area, our fire chief who was embezzling money from the from Fireman's Fund. I got an email today from a constituent who was on the State Board of Nursing, and February of last year, the executive director gave away $114,000 worth of licenses because they made a mistake. Governor was notified about it twice and nothing happened. This type of stuff is a huge waste of the taxpayers' money, and people within the government, people within our communities, when they know about this stuff, they don't really have a way to do it. Under our current statute, there's no teeth. And I'm trying to fix that. So that's the reason for me bringing this bill, to bring teeth to our current waste, fraud, and abuse statute, and to ensure that there's transparency and accountability to our system. And so I'll start going into the bill right now. So like I was saying, this bill will help prevent misuse of people's resources by providing the ability to report this misuse by tips and reports. It'll give the Department of Audit the tools necessary to efficiently detect waste, fraud, and abuse within the Wyoming government. The OIG in Illinois, by using this type of system, has realized $172.9 million in operational cost savings for the taxpayers. This has resulted in an ROI of $6.70 for every dollar spent.
What was that? What was the number again?
$6.70 for every $1 spent.
Okay.
This is out of Illinois. With employees providing approximately 50% of tips and reports, this information comes from LSO, and they got that information from a highly accredited association. So organizations with hotlines also detect fraud more quickly versus organizations without hotlines. Further research that I had LSO do for me, I had them contact different states and they found that staff hours ranged anywhere from 463.5 hours to about 630.5 hours per year. And then the number of complaints ranged anywhere from 81 to 439 complaints per year. Most states did not identify the need for additional funds for this program. So the one thing that I wanted to do, and something that I had heard last year, was a concern about not being really directed in the right direction when a complaint was brought to them. So I did some research and I found from another state how they listed on their website other government entities that they get common calls from. And so those government, on their website, they'd have the contact information for those government entities. And so that kind of helped drop those misdirected calls and misdirected emails down a lot. So that way they were able to be more efficient. And so that was one of the things I added into my bill to help with that efficiency. So kind of going into the bill actually now this time. On page 2, starting at line 7, it states that all reasonable steps shall be taken to protect the person's identity. Making the report, and the person may elect to have their identity protected except when required by law. The Department of Audit, if a Department of Audit employee discloses the identity of the person not employed by the department, then the employee shall be terminated. And this is to ensure that that employee or that person's identity is protected upon their wishes. For the circumstances where they're not required by law to keep their identities, if they're subpoenaed or something like that for a case, at that point, their identity would have to be released because they have to appear in court. So on page 4, starting around line 18, this is where the teeth of the bill start. And this is not only to hold people accountable, but this is also a deterrent. So No person determined by the department to have engaged in waste, fraud, or abuse shall be employed by a government entity. The results of finalized reviews, verifications, referrals conducted pursuant to this section, and any corrective action taken as a result. The homepage of the department's website referring to the Department of Audit shall contain a link to this information. This post shall include the name, position, and government entity of any person who has engaged in waste, fraud, or abuse in the operation of a government entity. The type of violation perpetrated, including the direct cost to the taxpayers of waste, fraud, and abuse, the penalties imposed, government resources expended to investigate and remedy the waste, fraud, or abuse. This is, I understand that this is a very harsh punishment, but we're here to protect the people and protect the people's money. And anyone that is in a public servant job needs to understand that they need to have the utmost respect for that position at all times. And if they're going to abuse that position, they're going to be punished. So, moving on, under 9-11, where it talks about discrimination against certain employees. So this is kind of protection for people that are actually doing the good thing. It says, I kept that pretty much the same. I just added intimidate or harass. Reason for that is, some extra language in there because there's always forms of discrimination and intimidation and harassment.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Vice.
Senator James, tell me which page you're on the harassment intimidation.
That would be on page 10.
Oh, you're ahead on 10.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
That'd be page 10, line 20.
Okay.
So I just added that new language right there. And then for those that want to abuse this program and make false claims and do that type of thing, there's also language in here that addresses that issue as well. So that starts on page 13, line 4. So as it goes through this, lays it out how any employee who knowingly makes any false allegations or false reports are subject to disciplinary actions. And then at the bottom of page 14 is where it says any employee I'm sorry, on the bottom page 13, my apologies. On the bottom of page 13, it says any employee found to have knowingly made a false report shall be subject to disciplinary action by the employee up to and including dismissal. That way it'll ensure if anyone's want to make any false reports or do anything like that, there's also consequences as well. And I also have an amendment that I would like to bring as well. Mr. Chairman, would you like to go over the bill?
Hang on to that thought one minute. Let's finish up with kind of the bill and let's make sure we kind of understand where we are. And then I think it'll be easier for us to talk about an amendment, unless your amendment makes something much simpler to understand.
No, it adds more language, and then we can go over the bill first.
Okay, all right. So let me, okay, thank you. Questions for Senator Bouchard? Go ahead, Senator Guru. What did I say? Senator for question? Oh,
Did we miss one? Just kidding.
he's one of the co-sponsors, so I'll claim that. I was
Ah.
smarter than I thought I was. But anyway, no, excuse me, Senator James. Didn't mean to.
No worries.
Got my tongue wrapped around my teeth and I couldn't see what I was saying. With that, Senator Drew, questions for Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay. No. Before we can get to the bill, I want to start about the premise in your opening remarks. And I guess I will talk about the bill, and I think it's laudable, and it's in some respects for sure. I mean, definitely accountability and giving people an opportunity to be heard and then have things ferreted out. Towards that end, in your opening remarks, you mentioned 3 specific instances that led you to this. One was about an investigation in foster care, something about that I believe was adjudicated. Is that true?
Mr.
Go ahead.
Chairman, Senator Drew, what that was actually referred to up to federal. And so that was taken to a higher level and those people were convicted.
Okay. Then the embezzlement by the fire chief, was that something too that was brought to court?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Drew, yes, that was brought to court and that person was also convicted.
Okay, then the last one, if I may continue. The last one, and this is particularly concerning to me with this law. Talked about somebody goes about the state nursing board reported to the governor, and I heard you say, and I may have missed it, nothing happened.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Drew, that's correct. It
Okay,
was reported twice.
could you,
Senator James, can you pull your mic over? You're kind of leaning this way. Go ahead and pull over in front of you so
Yeah.
when we'll pick up
Okay.
your voice and so anybody
Well-
else who's listening can too.
Roger that.
okay, that's serious stuff. And so what I want to ask now is I want to hear what specific charges were made, who made them, everything about that, because that's, people are listening to this. I'm sure folks in the governor's office are listening to this. And what you're saying, if I heard you correctly, is that you're saying that didn't say it, but you're intimating quite strongly that somebody was not doing their job to the point where if this legislation passed, somebody would be in a jumpsuit somewhere. So I'm just want to kind of get a bearing on exactly what you're saying. And specifically, you talk a lot about accountability here. So I want to hear some about accountability starting there.
Okay.
If that's all right.
So, I mean, if you know that now, if not, you can provide that information later. And let's be a little bit careful about proper names, but let's, please, go ahead if you're ready.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator Drew, I do actually have all the documents. I have the documents that was sent to the governor, both letters, and I have the documents from the person that did the issuing of the license and saying that they would be given away for free, the letter from that as well. And I can provide those to the committee if you would like. Or if you want me to read them, I can do that as well.
I think I'd rather have you provide those. I mean, they'll be part of the public record. Anybody will be able to look at them, but I think I'd rather have us look at those so we can look exactly what it is that you're saying, I think. So
Roger
yeah,
that.
please get a copy or email them to Karen or provide her with hard copies. That'd be fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything, what else you got, Senator Drew?
I'll let everybody else go.
Okay, anybody else have questions for Senator Drew? Senator, Mr. Vice President.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator James, you quoted another state where they had a similar type legislation in place and the cost savings. Do you recall how many reports that they had that were actually resulted in valid claims? I'm trying to understand if it's a big state, are they getting a lot of claims, or is this a rarely used, frequently used, and then a disposition of those?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice President, so that one in particular was, I don't have the exact number of claims. I know that the valid number of claims was far more. This was more to give you the justification, the ROI of the program, to show that it is worth the money. That was more of the point on that one. But from what I heard, it was a Harvard Law study done on this, and I can get you everyone a copy of that as well. If I remember correctly, there was about $2 billion worth of fraud at some point in time during this. It was like during 1 year, but in legitimate Medicaid uses, there was 8 billion. So, so 2 of the 8 billion was fraudulent. If I remember correctly, I will get you the documents so that way I will give you the accurate numbers.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that, I believe in the Attorney General's office, we do have an investigative unit to look at Medicaid fraud now. Do you know how many cases they've had and what the disposition of any of those were?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice President, no, I don't. All I do know is the last Medicaid fraud investigator that the state did have that was actually doing his job got fired. And then when he got fired, his wife got fired as well. So I would assume there may be some hesitation in him or her actually doing their job to their fullest extent.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I just know that it is a big deal. There is a lot of money there. You know, that's why we put those positions in the Attorney General's office, is to go after that. In fact, I was just reading one of the local papers from the Bighorn Basin where there's 3 individuals under indictment right now for Medicaid fraud. When you looked at this, Senator James, was the biggest component you found in the Medicaid fraud system, or was it just across the board? Was there one area that had a higher level of fraud than others within state and local governments?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice President, Medicaid would definitely rank up there. Whether it be the highest or not, I don't know for sure, but it's definitely widespread across. I personally, having no life and doing lots of research, have seen lots of rabbit holes where I could send someone off to. But me not being in government, I'm hesitant to do that, which is why I am making this available to government employees, as they would have far more information and be able to give more detailed information than I could.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is that it, Senator Hicks? Are you done? Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator James, you started out with how widespread it is, and you gave 3 examples. I didn't catch the third, but I do know one was Medicaid fraud, one was embezzlement, and we have statutes. We have laws against Medicaid fraud, and we have laws against embezzlement. So it's not that there's a lack of a remedy there. That's what I'm confused why. Because I'll tell you what, you get crosswise with the government on the Medicaid program, and you are in the wheels of government may grind slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. And so I'm failing to understand what's wrong with our current Medicaid fraud and abuse system investigative apparatus, that we need another apparatus on top of the apparatus. And then embezzlement, people go to prison for embezzlement. I know people gone to prison for embezzlement, and I know people have gone to prison for Medicaid fraud. So I'm missing what's missing in the system. So try and explain that to me one more time.
Go ahead, Senator James.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair. So the intent of this bill is a preventative. So what this will allow to do, if there's employees within this government entity, within Medicaid, for your example, if someone sees this happening, if they see this building up, or if they see this person doing these actions, they can report this before it actually goes to its full extent, before all this money is used, before all this money is taken, before the people are hurt by their actions. So this is the intent of this bill, to allow that preventative measure in place. Currently, we do not have that. And currently, we do not have the teeth to do anything about it. As far as I know specifically with Medicaid and embezzlement, yes, but this covers a wide range of area of government. So while there is something for Medicaid, there wouldn't be remedies for other areas within government. And I have specific in my amendment that I'm bringing, there it specifies more on how it'll deal with those people, what needs to be done, what they need to do to qualify for the punishments, basically. I hope that helps.
Well, not particularly, but I mean, have you spoken to the Department of Health about their need to give their employees more options to report Medicaid fraud and abuse, and your perceived lack of diligence on the part of their own employees to highlight where they see the system being ripped off? And what did the department say?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, no, I did not reach out to them. However, if the issue wasn't, if they had everything in place to be able to prevent this, and then it wouldn't happen in theory nearly as often as it does. So this would give them the ability to report it as they see it, when they see the writing on the wall, because they'll have the posters in the break room. My amendment also addresses the issue of informing the employees on how to report waste, fraud, and abuse as well. So this is just making sure that everyone is able to report it when they see it.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, so Senator James, I think I see where you're heading. I'm not sure that it's not already in statute. I'm looking at the existing language. Much of what you want to do is there. Some of these you've added a paragraph or two, but I think what you're trying to do is create what's called a corporate compliance policy. And a corporate compliance policy is something that every healthcare provider, it started out with all the defense suppliers had to have a corporate compliance policy. And then healthcare providers, and it's common in corporate America. So the elements of that are: one, there's a reporting mechanism. Two, it's anonymous to the extent it's possible, but if you came to me and I was the compliance officer and you said, I want to tell you something about Senator Perkins, but I don't want to know my name, I'll say, Tom, I can't guarantee that. I mean, I can take the complaint, but I can't guarantee that, because he has a right to know. I have to confront him. So what you're saying here is if anybody ever lets that information out there canned, that kind of stops your program dead in its tracks, because they have to be able to investigate, and the person making the complaint, the person being complained against, is going to have a right to know what's being said in order to defend themselves. You can't just not give them any defense. Okay, so then the next element is every complaint needs to be investigated and followed up on and resolved one way or another. And the emphasis typically is on fraud and abuse. Waste is a little squishy. I mean, the governmental program you like, I regard as waste. I mean, there's a little squishiness there, but in a corporate compliance program, it's fraud, abuse, sexual harassment, illegal, immoral, unethical activity. It's not necessarily something you can go to jail for. The other element is there's usually an honor code. If you see it, you are obligated to report it. If I'm working with you and I see you doing something wrong, I can't tolerate it. I have to report it. And then whistleblower protection, so a lot of these elements are already in here. It might be that you can but it's when you go above and beyond and say, we're going to seek an injunction and we're going to fire anybody that discloses information. But I think you're on the right track. I just think that there's some elements here that just go above and beyond. You you've got to remember that the person being accused has rights as well for confrontation of somebody that makes these kind of allegations against them. But I guess I'd have to see the rest of the code to know whether there might already be many of these things incorporated into code. But you're right. If all the elements of a compliance program are not in place in statute, they need to be in place. So I do agree with you there. And I laud your efforts to try and make sure that this sort of thing is of record.
Okay, good luck. Okay, thank you.
Come back carrying your shield in victory.
Yeah. All right, so thank you for that. Thank you. So you have any response to Senator Kinski? It wasn't really a question, but do you have any response to Senator Kinski?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman. So with Medicaid and that type of thing, they do have additional protections, and it does go above and beyond what our current statutes are. So this is not only to fill in the blanks there, wherever they may be, but this is also to cover all of our state and all of our government entities where that language does not exist. So that's why, yes, you're correct that that type of language does exist with Medicaid and the fraud there. But I would also say that if they were so efficient, then the type of Medicaid fraud, wouldn't be happening the way it does. I mean, I have yet to hear from anyone. I've talked to a lot of doctors and nurses out there. I've contacted a lot of them. None of them know how to contact Medicaid fraud if they were to come about it. Outside of going up to their employer, their boss, and doing it that way, reporting it that way. But as far as they've all told me that they didn't know how. So that was one of the reasons that this was brought forward. But it was also other public employees. Then there's just a lot of it going on. But
okay, right. Thank you. I guess I have some of the same questions that so I don't have to repeat those that Senator Kinski had. I did note that when we're doing this, we're extending this to governmental entities, and it's a broad spectrum of governmental entities. So it's not just the state; it's any agency of the state, it's any authority, board, commission, department, but also is any political subdivision of the state, municipal or special district governing body, combination thereof, school district, municipal corporation, board, department. So it's expansive. Basically anybody who touches government money to the government, this would apply to them, right? And that's
yes, Mr.
that's the
Chairman.
intent of the bill. Okay. So with that, I think we're going to rapidly run out of time here. Senator James, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about? We'll hang on to the amendment because we'll wait and see if we see how the bill, we'll wait till we work the bill for that, okay?
Okay.
I know that there's some people that are here to tell, we got some people from County Commissioners Association and that. Why don't we go ahead and let's take some public comment while we've got people here. Is there anybody here that's in the room that wishes to provide public comment on this bill?
Yes, Mr.
In fact, and is there, I guess we do have, let's go with the Department of Audit. We got to get our department heads first. Justin, Director Chavez, welcome. We're glad to have you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Justin Chavez, Public Funds Administrator with the Department of Audit. I also have with me our Interim Director, Fred Reif. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the bill. Our primary concern with this bill comes down to resources. As currently written, it would add responsibility and what we would anticipate being some pretty significant responsibility without adding any additional resources. Mr. Chairman, you might recall from our testimony in front of Management Audit Committee over the last year or so that our division has quite a few statutory responsibilities, and we're not a real big division. So our state and local audit section has an audit manager and 6 auditors, and those people are responsible for producing the annual cost of government report, which takes over 4,000 hours to complete, responsible for trying to audit approximately 500 special districts and another 50 towns, as well as responsible for state agency performance measure audits. And then on top of that, we do also do fraud work. We provide assistance to law enforcement in terms of investigations, typically embezzlement investigations. We average probably about assisting on 5 of those a year. And that's about 750 hours a year that we spend on fraud investigations. And so in addition to the administrative kind of collecting, analyzing, monitoring, and reporting that this bill would add to us, we would also anticipate our workload in terms of assisting on fraud investigations to go up. And so without additional resources, we would be looking at reallocating resources from doing audits, which we would consider a preventative control. One of the primary objectives of our audits is to identify internal control weaknesses and provide recommendations to address those. We'd have to reallocate from audits to the fraud work, which is more of a detective control to report after something has already happened. And Senator James brings up a good point that those entities with fraud hotlines are better at fighting fraud than those without. But it's also true that internal controls are more effective at fighting fraud than hotlines. If you look at the American Association of or Association of Certified Fraud Examiners annual report to the nations, it'll show that frauds that are detected by internal controls are caught quicker and for lower dollar amounts than those with hotlines. So again, that's not to say that hotlines are a bad thing. I think an avenue for people to report concerns about fraud is a good thing. But we would be concerned if we had to reallocate from audits to fraud work. Most of the fraud work that we assist on, the reason the fraud happened in the first place is because basic internal controls were missing that allowed that fraud to happen. If those basic internal controls were present, it could have either prevented the fraud in the first place or detected it much sooner. And so with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you, Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Chavez, it says here in the fiscal note that the following agencies will be asked to provide their estimates of the administrative fiscal impact prior to the first committee meeting to held concerning this bill. And then it lists your department. Did we miss that, or has that been prepared?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, we did provide a fiscal note to LSO on January 11th. So it has been provided to the Legislative Service Office.
I can, sure, go ahead, follow up. Go ahead, Senator Guru, ask your questions.
I'll just, if you recall what that number was.
Right here. Looks like
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, holding out on us, huh?
Sorry, just coming in.
So it looks to me like you just got one person.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, we figured that would be the prudent way to go, is to start with just one and see how the workload stacks up with one person.
Okay. And what level would that be? Is that you've got your, I mean, what kind of person are you looking for to fill that position, do you believe? Is it a certified fraud auditor? What kind of person are you looking at?
Mr. Chairman, we would be looking for a principal audit position, which is essentially a senior lead, and would also be looking for someone who has the certified fraud examiner credential.
Okay. And on the personnel benefits, You think you can hire him for that? Here, hire him or her for that? Those guys, you don't find those guys and those men and women, they're just not around every corner.
Mr. Chairman, I think we could. We have a few CFEs within our division that I suspect would be interested in a position that is completely fraud focused. So I believe we'd be able to fill that position.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Kinski.
who am I talking to, Chavez or,
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kinski, yeah, Justin Chavez.
Justin? So this fiscal note, it says $120,000, but then on the back side, it says for a full buy-in, and we assume costs would be double. We're actually looking over $250,000 then. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kinski, that's correct.
Okay. And then you referred to a national association of some kind. When I use the phrase corporate compliance program as a consequence of your training background or the national association, does that ring any bells for you?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kinski, not for me specifically, no.
Okay, but you do have information on hotlines.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kinski, yes. That
And-
report is published by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners on an annual basis and is available on its website.
Mr. Chavez, would you mind forwarding that to myself and Senator James as well? I'd like to take a look at it if you could. And tell me, is the hotline program just a standalone deal, or what other aspects are there to a hotline program besides just a hotline? Give me an idea of what's involved in a hotline program.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kinski, so from the bill, we would have to have.
Mr. Chairman, no, I'm not talking about this bill.
Uh,
I'm talking about your understanding what other states do. We don't have a hotline program in Wyoming. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kinski, that's correct. I couldn't tell you right offhand exactly what other states do in terms of their hotline. I can tell you that approximately 38 states do operate a fraud hotline. But beyond that, I couldn't tell you much about specifics.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chavez.
Okay, anything else from Mr. Chavez? Go ahead, Senator Simons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, fellas. How are you? I was just wondering, this is not just fraud, this is waste and abuse. So I would wonder how you would handle that as well. And then we were quoted that there for return on investment, for every dollar spent, we could recover $6.70. Does that seem accurate to you? And then thirdly, we just finished reducing your budget and cutting 4 full-time auditors from the budget. So if you could talk about how that has affected your office and how this might work going forward. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Steinmetz. So first on waste and abuse, I think Senator Kinski kind of hit the nail on the head with that in his comments earlier, where waste can be a little more nebulous, if you will. That's a lot more subjective and in the eye of the beholder, as opposed to abuse, you can nail down a little bit more. And then those opposed to fraud, which has a lot more solid criteria. So we would really just have to look at each situation and the specific characteristics around that in terms of determining waste or abuse. In terms of an ROI, so for us, I can tell you in terms of our hours spent versus what's ultimately adjudicated through the court system, recent years has been about 3.5 to 1, rather than the 6.9. Senator James referred to the Office of Inspector General in Illinois. An OIG has a little bit different focus than just an audit department. In addition to doing investigations, they also do stuff like looking at efficiencies, if you will, to arrive at savings. And then in terms of the cuts to the department, I'm going to let our director speak to that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Steinmetz, Fred Reif, Interim Director, Department of Audit. The 4 cuts that were mentioned, those were done in our Mineral Audit Division and in our Excise Tax Division. The Public Funds Division had cuts a little bit to the 100 series, but no positions lost. We also had to cut some from the 200 series, which is the operating fund, and then also some in the 900 series, which affects our oversight of the statewide audit. So each one of our divisions operates a little differently. And so when Mr. Chavez talks about the spreading the workload across his existing auditors, that's what he's referring to. And so my concern with that on this bill too is that it does seem to expand the scope of what the Department of Audit's Public Funds Division has historically done, and gives us more of an oversight or IG role. And so if that happens, just that would be aware of that. Typically in our department, that's more done in the banking division as a financial regulator. So a little bit of a change in how we would approach things, a little more power given to the Department of Audit in that regard.
Or Administrator Chavez or Director, anything else?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anybody else, any other governmental individuals to speak of? And we are out of time. We will continue this on Thursday. I don't know what time. We need to check. Karen, can you check and see when rules, we've got Senator Guru and Senator Hicks are both on Rules Committee, and I know they're meeting Tuesday or Thursday. And then out of here, was anybody here to testify on that bill? On this bill today? Okay. Yeah, sorry, so anyway, Thursday. Well, so it's either going to be Thursday morning or Thursday noon. So, you know, I guess we gotta accommodate Senator Guru and his busy schedule and the Vice President. And we may just move, we may soldier on without you. Okay. All right, we'll stand adjourned until